over that first 2 years of Overstory, most important then is learning, right? People always think you have product market fit early, but it takes a while to get there. And I think it was a lot of experimentation, trying new type of customers, learning from customers. And at a certain point, we just got a strong pull from these electric utilities. The more we learned about it, they're causing massive fires in California back then and also here in Southern Europe. The more we felt, the tech that we actually already have would be super valuable for them, and they're willing to pay a premium for it.
My guest today is Indra Den Bakker. He's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Overstory, which uses satellite imagery to monitor vegetation around electric power lines. In some of the worst cases, if a branch or a tree falls on a power line, that can lead to some pretty dramatic wildfire and loss in forests. So Overstory works with those companies and provides them with information at a really large scale about the state of vegetation around their power lines. A pretty important note before we get started. Indra is actually my boss. I work, when I'm not doing this podcast, at Overstory as a geospatial data scientist. I do want you to know that this podcast is my work. It's what I do when I'm not at Overstory, and these things have nothing in common, except when I do have someone on the podcast like Indra to talk about that work. But I think it's still important for you to know, and you can make up your mind about what you think about the conversation. But I just had Indra as I would have any other guests. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of this episode. It's again sponsored by Element 84. They've been the first sponsor and they're continuing to support me in this work. So I want to say a big thank you to them. Element 84 is a geospatial software engineering company that focuses on big data problems. One of the examples of what they've done is take the Sentinel-2 optical imagery and put it on AWS, Amazon Web Services open data program, so that it's a lot easier to access. I've actually had Dan Pallon, their CEO, on the podcast to talk about how him and his wife co-founded the company and how they're thinking about it. I'll have links to that in the show notes, so you can go listen to that and check them out. With all of that said, here's my conversation with Indra Den Bakker. Thanks for coming here. Thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me over. Excited to be on this side of the table with you.
Great. I don't know if you know, I like starting these conversations the same way every single time. I like asking people how they would describe themselves. And so I'm quite curious to know, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, interesting. I would say data scientist. I'm a data scientist by heart, on a mission to help solve the climate crisis. I think that's how I would describe myself.
So can you expand a little bit on that? What you're not really doing the data science right now. That role has changed, for example. But let's step back a little bit. You still see yourself as that, as like a data scientist with a mission on climate change.
Yeah, I would say like,
okay.
You know better than I, that I'm not doing the day-to-day hands-on work, but yeah, I think that's what I deep in my heart still am, and that's how I look at the world or make decisions or do stuff. So I think that's a large part of my life, and I occasionally do some small things with data science, but it's not my core job anymore. But that's how I approach stuff, and I think that's big part of our team and of our approach as well. So yeah, I think that's still sort of on the background describes myself.
How does that still, like you said, it still is how you are at heart and how you make decisions. Can you expand a little bit on that? Like, how does it help you make decision, like having that data science background? We'll get into that a little bit more, but let's dig into that. Because right now you're, for a bit of context, you're the CEO of Overstory. You're also my boss.
Small disclaimer.
Small disclaimer. But you're a data scientist at heart. How does that help you make decisions in your role as a CEO today?
Yeah, and I think I always like to make data-driven decisions, but as you also know, data science is also partly an art, right? You never know, not always have, I think, the full underlying data to make decisions, and I think that's partly also what's part of building a company. Like you get a lot of information, a lot of opinions, a lot of data points. It won't be perfect, and still you have to make a decision for what's next, or a decision of what you are going to do or what not. So I think that is very related in terms of how you build a company. How do you filter noisy data? How do you know it's noisy? It's quite similar. There's lots of similarities in that sense, and not everyone approaches building a company the same way, but I like to approach it like that. And also because I was a data scientist, I think that is more natural to me to think like that, I guess.
Right. So another thing I find quite interesting is hearing, because we have a pretty diverse team at Overstory. There's people who are very technical, some people who aren't. One thing that I find quite interesting is asking all of these different people how they describe the company. Because everybody sees a different side of it and sees a different value in it. How do you describe Overstory? How do you describe what the company does?
Good. That's an interesting question, indeed, and probably good for you to answer as well. I think we're really a climate-driven, mission-driven team that really wants to contribute to the climate crisis, and I think that's what, like some more than others, obviously, but I think that's what motivates us all to go to work again and build the products that we build and have an impact on our customers, on the planet, and on climate. And for that, I think that's probably where my data science background comes from. I think what we all see is that to improve all the decision making around forest, trees, we need to measure what's there, what is changing. I think that's the role that Overstory plays and will play in the future as well. Like, how can we create more transparency in the world around forest, trees, and different ecosystems? And like a large part of what we do is the technology, but I always see like tech is a means, right? Like satellite images are a means, machine learning is a means. So I intentionally leave it a little bit out of this description because I think like maybe in the future we'll use other sensors or maybe we'll use other techniques. I would be fine with that. I mean, like I strongly believe that these are technologies that will have a long-standing impact. But I think if I describe Overstory, it's more about what we do or what we're trying to achieve than how we do it, I guess.
So it's about, so the climate impact is at the center of that. And then the angle we're taking is on the vegetation side. Do you see that changing as well? Or do you see, because you said on the tools that we use, like satellite imagery, and we'll get to that a bit later, you see that potentially changing down the line. Do you see the focus on vegetation changing as well? Or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think data is at the center of it, and data about vegetation is key for us now. But I think long term, like it's an ecosystem, right? I don't think we can see vegetation separate from water or from weather or from other, from soil. So I think there will be some consolidation and we'll play our part in that as well. But I think, especially now that this technology is really new, or at least how it's coming together with ML plus satellite imagery, I think that focus is really important to build something valuable and actionable for our customers. So I think that's why vegetation is at the core. I think it will definitely be at the core for longer. But you can already see now, like vegetation is at the core, but it has applications in wildfires, in forest management, in different aspects. So, but I think vegetation is definitely at the core now, and it will change a little bit, but it will be a large part of what we focus on, I think, for the near future.
Can you tell me a little bit the story of Overstory? Like, how did you go from you're a data scientist to, okay, now we have a climate company that's focused on vegetation, and then like why satellite imagery? Can we go back to like the beginning?
Yeah, and I think that made me think of like why still a data scientist? Like 2 years ago, I was still like it went so fast still, and can imagine going back in time. But I think everything happened really fast. But I was a data scientist, mainly working in advertising technology before, so lots of data, learned a lot, saw a lot of beautiful things that we were building as a team. And I think that's where I also learned like, wow, you can really have a big impact with a small team if you are focused and build the right stuff. But at a certain point I was like, okay, what else do I want to do with the skills that I have, right? Like, do I want to sell more ads to people for the rest of my life, or is there something more? And I traveled a lot. My mother's from Indonesia, so saw a lot of beautiful places, but also things that weren't going well with our forest and trees. And it was not one moment, but I think over time I realized, and climate was more of a topic over time. So I was like, okay, I really want to devote the rest of my career or time also on climate. And I'm not sure if it was always the idea to start my own company. I think that grew over time, and in hindsight, it made a lot of sense. But I think at that moment, it's not something that I had in mind. But eventually, via a machine learning competition on Kaggle from Planet to detect deforestation in the Amazon rainforest with their satellite images, where we did really well. That's when me and my co-founder and partner Anik started discussing, wow, this is really like, I didn't have any formal background in satellite imagery or remote sensing, not in forestry as well, but we ended up, I think, 5th out of 1,000 teams. So I was like, okay, there are some skills that I can use that is apparently valuable for a company like Planet, which I thought back then and still think is a cool company. So I thought, like, okay, what can we do more with this combination of satellite images and machine learning to look at forest and trees? And yeah, I think we just decided to found the company, and one thing led to the other.
How do you go from Kaggle to starting a company?
Yeah, that sounds like a small step, but it's
because one of the common so Kaggle is this platform, like probably the biggest competition platform for machine learning still today. But one of the common criticism of like what happens on Kaggle is that it's a playground where the data has been pre-processed a lot, and there's a very, even which metric to use has been defined, and there's a clear leaderboard. So how do you go from, okay, we have some pretty cool tech that can work, which is a pretty good feat still, like making it 5th to a Kaggle competition is not easy. How do you go from that to, okay, now we're going to enter a bit more the real world? I put big quotes because
no, I understand, and also understand where that criticism comes from. So I still think like there's so much you can learn of by just doing that, right? Like it's easy if you, as an outsider, to criticize what you learn on Kaggle, but I think people really underestimate what you learn there and how messy the data sometimes is. And yeah, I think there's just a lot to learn there. But I think that other part I learned more on the job in that startup that I worked before that, and like how to, like, what I really learned there is that you can build really cool tech with a small team, very scalable, but how to bring that to the customer. I think that part I already had in my mind, or at least not fully in my mind, but I knew like that part is as important as the tech itself. So I was not like a techie that knows like, oh, you can just build cool tech and then you will be successful. I think I always knew like there will be a lot of hard work next to the tech, a lot of knowledge that I necessarily don't have maybe to execute on. And I think that's where Anik played a huge role in maybe making the business cases, understanding who the type of customers were early on as well. So I think that was also a good combination of me being very technical, she very business driven and business case driven. And yeah, we just started to have a lot of conversations, I think, after that Kaggle competition, just speaking with people. What are you missing? Like, what do you want to know about forest and trees? Oh, there's Global Forest Watch, but why aren't you using it? Or what is missing from there? And I think we learned a lot in a small amount of time that we got even more enthusiastic, spent more time, and just decided to start a company. And I think that's part of being an entrepreneur as well. I think you need to jump in. You don't know all the answers, but sometimes you need to be naive and just do it. And that's how you learn along the way. You will make a lot of mistakes, which is fine as long as you learn from it. But I think that just doing it, I think that was crucial for us as well. And yeah, there were moments that we almost didn't make it in that first year, but I think just doing it really helped us to get started, I think.
So what did it look like in the early days? Like you start talking to customers. I'm guessing that's a really big part of it. You mentioned Global Forest Watch. Like, for example, what come out of those conversations about? So Global Forest Watch is this like pretty amazing map and data set of a lot of the deforestation that's happening, and just a lot of like a catalog of forests globally around the world. So what I'm curious to understand a little bit like what were the first steps? What did it look like?
I mean, like I think Global Forest Watch is instrumental for a lot of companies or a lot of things that we're doing now. So I think it was already huge then, but we were trying to understand, like, because it was already public, but what else can we build next to it on top of that that's commercially viable? And I think we learned from talking with NGOs or talking with forest industry, a bank, like what is where would you pay a premium for to have better, even more detailed insight? And I think that was the outcome of most of those conversations. Like Global Forest Watch works really well at scale, but it's sometimes not accurate enough on a plot level or on a tree level. And I think that makes it hard for some companies to really act upon it. And I think that's the step where we immediately thought like, okay, that's where high resolution can play a role, which is more expensive, but these are commercial companies with budget. So how can we let them pay for that extra insight? Like, and what is the delta as well, right? Like, do you want to know all trees, or is it more important that you are more accurate if it's deforestation that it happens? Is the precision or recall important? So those small details do matter for some stakeholders. And I think we found those stakeholders early on. We had a lot of conversations also with Airbus that was building such a platform themselves as well. So just learning and being adaptable in terms of what is needed. And I think we got bullish more on the commercial data, the higher resolution, because we said like that, then it's more actionable. Then you have a higher accuracy of the change really happening. Obviously, like if a large part of a forest disappears, you will see it on Global Forest Watch. But what you actually want is if there's 1 or 3 trees move or more selective logging, if that's happening, then you can already act before the large plot disappears. So I think that was the angle that we're trying to solve early on. I think we got more bullish on high resolution, got into what else you could do in terms of tree species, tree health, and I think that's not very different from what we're building now and how we position ourselves, I think, as Overstory now. It evolved a lot in terms of type of customers, product, even machine learning models, but I think that part really, that premium, trying to deliver high accuracy at scale, I think that's still as well, that's still where our customers are really happy with as well.
And so how do we end up on utilities?
Yeah.
And I want to explain like what utilities are, mostly because when I joined, I had no idea what utilities are. So it's like companies who basically do the transportation of electricity between the place it's created. It's just like all the power lines that we see, the companies who operate all the power lines.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest focus of what Overstory is doing today. How did we get to that focus?
Yeah, also a long journey and a lot of learnings in between, I guess. So I think it took 2 years to really start to focus on that. And I think the funny thing is, like, for us here in the Netherlands, we only have large transmission lines above ground, but all the distribution lines, so the smaller, lower voltage lines are underground. So it's not as common for us Dutch people to think about power lines and vegetation in general. But I think over that first 2 years of Overstory, we just try to, I think most important then is learning, right? Like I mean, like people always think you have product market fit early, but it takes a while to get there. And I think it was a lot of experimentation, trying new type of customers, learning from customers. And at a certain point, we just got a strong pull from these electric utilities and their problems. And the more we learned about it, that they're causing massive fires in California back then and also here in Southern Europe, the more we felt, the tech that we actually already have would be super valuable for them, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. And I think especially that large part, that they are willing to pay for it and act on it, was really important, because there's a lot of other markets like carbon offset markets, forest monitoring, but that's not the sweet spot for the very high resolution satellite images, because it's still quite costly to acquire 30 centimeter, 50 centimeter satellite imagery. And I think what we learned about these utilities is they're flying helicopters or drones every day. So 30 centimeter, 50 centimeter resolution is relatively cost effective for them. And I think that's sort of a moment where we thought, okay, this is a market where you can grow fast, where the budgets are already there, and where there's a real problem. And it sounds like we got that moment in one go, but it was, I think, just over those 2 years, more data, experimentation and trying. But I think once we decided to focus on that, it became, every new customer we onboarded, it became more clear that this is product market fit, because you just get a strong pull.
Yeah, this is an interesting part about, like, it's not just the tech, but it's more on the business model, where on the higher res imagery, be it spatially or temporally, you can get a lot more insight, but it costs a lot more, especially given that a lot of programs that are at a lower resolution spatially temporally, like Copernicus, like Landsat, are free.
Yeah.
So the cost of data is zero. It's just the compute that you're going to do on top of it. And so there's a huge step in cost if you want to go to high res. So like finding that business where there is a lot of that spending is going to be trickier.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think like, because if you are only using public data, then you're even more competing on cost, because then the difference between you and another provider is the cost you put on top. Like the margin is just what you put on top of it. So I think that's where we wanted to stay a little bit away from. Like I know we spoke to other companies and they said like, wow, we're the best in processing Sentinel images for forest. But the truth is, if you just used a little bit higher resolution satellite images, you don't need fancy algorithms. You can get higher accuracy than they get because you just have more in your image. There's a little bit of gray area obviously, but I think like it's hard to create really something defensible on medium resolution satellite imagery. You just need to roll out that skill and do it very well, I think.
Right.
Where I think for more high resolution data, you can do that with medium resolution as well. But how do you combine different data sets? What do you do on top of it? The post-processing, pre-processing, you can gain more there and get even more insight. So yeah, I think you're right. Like that delta in price should be worded to the customer. So it's really about the actionability as well. And there's a trade-off. So I think for probably majority of customers, Sentinel data would be good enough to build something actionable. But I think for our customer segment, that just doesn't work, because if you miss one single tree or 4 trees, those are often the trees that grow into the line or fall in the line and cause a fire, right? So for them, it's really about very detailed, but at the same time at scale.
Yeah, one of the things I find, one of the things I like at Overstory is the fact that the data and the tech doesn't make it into the sales pitch that much at the end. Like the customer doesn't care about that. And I think it's one of the things that I find interesting about, like we're talking about, okay, yeah, high res is better because blah, 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 or low res is better because XYZ and things like that. But then when we get to the conversation about, like one example is you go to the website, there's no mention of 50 centimeter or whatever. It's not about that. It's about the like solving the customer's problem. And it's the thing where a lot of, like in the Earth observation industry, that's still not figured out everywhere, where we still have this like, oh, the data is going to solve all the problem. Better data, I guess, equals better problem solving. But one of the things that Overstory is like putting a lot in is building a product as well on top of the layer. We're not selling directly the data. We're selling a product on that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what the process was like for that? About it's not about how fancy our data is. It's how we can solve people's problems.
Yeah, and I think that also evolved over time. I think the tech got removed more and more over the years as well. And like if we can use Sentinel to solve the same problem, we would 100% do it. I'm not married to high resolution or Sentinel, so you're totally right. Like and I think that relates to the description that I gave. Like I think why Overstory was founded is not because we want to use satellite images or we think we can build fancy machine learning models. We want to solve a problem, and that's the climate problem. So that really helps, I think, in that sense, to prioritize what to sell and how to sell it, because it's a real problem that you're trying to solve. Climate in general, I don't think we will solve climate as a company, but we can contribute to the solution. And then you think about what are the real problems of our customers and what's needed to get there. And obviously, like at some point, you need to make decisions in what kind of satellite images do work for our type of customers. And I think for our current focus customer segment, it became clear very early that you need the high resolution. Yeah, we tried lower as well, but I think it was very clear that you missed too much, and I think that is so important for this customer segment. So yeah, I think just I think we have a team that really listens well to the customer, trying to understand the real problem. Sometimes the customer doesn't know, right? So you need to guide them as well. And there are customers that talk about, okay, do I need stereo images? Try stereo. Do I need 30 centimeters? And we help them. Like I think that's what customers also like about working with us, is that we give them the honest answer. Right? Like sometimes they don't need 30 centimeters. They need 50, and we just say that to them. Like, although maybe it's more expensive or less expensive, I think that's how you build relationship with your customers and solve problems together. Because in the end, I think, especially in B2B enterprise, you need to do it with the customer. It's just, especially in climate, it's not just another software tool, right? It's a partnership. It's something that needs to evolve over time. They need to change how they work. They need to change how they use data. So there's lots of elements in there that's less related to the satellite images, but which is probably even more important than the tech behind it. But the tech is crucial to get right, to build that trust with the customer as well.
Yeah, everything is built on top of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, how, like, how do you move to, like, then bringing, like, using the data to solve the customer's problem without giving them, you know, a raster layer that maybe one of the GIS person in the team knows, but the people we talk to are people who manage the vegetation for those utility companies.
Yeah.
They might not be familiar with all of that. We have information that can be useful to them. How do you bridge that gap between, okay, we can see that, you know, in the images the data is there, or we can create layers where it's there, but they maybe don't care about that. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, also a lot of learning, I think, what we did in the last few years, and I think we have the right team to do that. I think also doing that step by step. I think what we did well is not building a product from scratch that we think will work. I think we really started from scratch and gradually add layers on top of it, and I think that's super important, continuously trying to listen. And I think that's where you need that relationship with the customer as well. It's why it's a partnership. Like, they need to be able to share what they really need and how they use the product, or what's missing or what not. So really step by step, because, like, I think first 3 customers, like, not in the non-utility space, it was raster layers or vector layers that we were sharing, but pretty soon you will see, like, oh, this is not actionable for them, right? Like, it needs to go through different departments before that person actually can solve his problem, which is maybe just a quick summary of the different land uses. I don't know, it can be anything, but I think trying always to get closer to the real problem, I think that's what we're continuously trying to do, and what we did over the years very well. And I think also when Fiona joined, our chief product officer, that was also an important moment that we focused more on that product part itself and really building a strong thesis around what a product is. And I think that helped also to make those steps to get where we are now, where it's really a standalone fleshed out product where we add new features over time. But we know that new features will help, but we are very careful in just releasing it for one customer. It needs to be well understood what the problem is we're solving for multiple customers.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting is that there was even like a designer in very early on in the project, which is not the thing that you hear a lot about data science and bringing impact with data. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly, I think, what was a huge influence from Fiona to do that early. Like, she knew that that's not her skill, but she knew it would be super important for Overstory. And I think when people think about designer, it's only about what color the button gets. But I think our designer is really a product designer, right? Like, really understanding what is the problem the customer tries to solve, and what tools does he or she need to get there. And I think that's what Matthias, our first product designer, really does well, and that's where we selected him on as well. Like, understanding the problem. It was his most important part of his job early on. Like, not necessarily designing things, but listening, understanding the problem, and then design something for them to interact with, and make it easier over time, and make sure that they can solve their problems. And I think that was a really good decision, I would say. Like, at that moment, so that's almost 2 years ago when we decided, I think he joined 1.5 years ago, but that moment to decide to build our own product on top of it, I think without it, we wouldn't have been where we are now, because it is just not as actionable and as valuable for our customer. And I think that's where that vertical focus, downstream focus really helps as well, because you cannot do that for 10 different types of customers as well.
Yeah. How do you decide to focus? Because there's this balance between, like, if you focus, that means you can get better and maybe the best at one vertical, but then that means that maybe you're missing out on the other ones. When did you feel comfortable about, like, okay, this is where we go, and we would decide to focus on that? Because as you said, then you start building a product, you start building on the data teams as well to optimize for that vertical compared to all the other ones. Like, how do you think about, like, focusing versus diversifying, and which way to go?
Yeah, it's very honest answer is very tricky, but I think it's should be like, I think it's one of my core tasks as CEO is to keep everyone focused, because it's very easy, especially in what we do, to get distracted. Sounds too negative, but to be pulled in a different direction because there's a huge customer coming along that waves with their wallet and can pay a lot of money. But like, I think always keeping in mind, like, what's the end game, where do we want to go to in the end with the company, and have a path towards that. I think that helps me at least to say no to those type of customers. Say, okay, but that's not the path to long-term success. But it's difficult. Like, we still get a lot of inbound from different markets that look very attractive. But I think people always say you don't know really what product market fit is until you have it. And I think that's what we've really experienced with electric utilities. Like, the pool is so strong. Why they buy it, how fast they can buy, even for a slow-moving industry. I think that's very telling for how clearly they need our product, and I think that helps me at least to focus for now. But I mean, we know that we want to go broader at some point, but it's a thin line. We shouldn't do it too early, and I think now that we show such strength in this market, we should even double down on that focus. Right. But it's tempting. It's difficult, and we've made mistakes in the past for sure as well, and I think now, like, once you have that in mind, it's easier to stay focused, because we see the benefits of that focus of the last year or 2 years, I think.
Yeah, and so it kind of acts as a feedback loop where
I think so. Yeah, right. Definitely. I think, but that's always in hindsight, right? Like, so that's easy to say now that that was good to focus, but on the moment itself. And that's why like, it's still a little bit, data science is still a little bit of art. You don't have all the data points to decide to go after that market or maybe another market at that point. In hindsight, it's very easy to say, well, it was a good decision. Of course, you try to collect more data, but in the end, it's also a little bit gut feeling, experience, I guess, to see which direction you want to go. But also not being afraid to make mistakes, I think, is also super important. But then when you realize it's a mistake, then do something about it. I think that helps us as well, in terms of the focus.
Like, being able to pivot, to change.
Like, if a customer segment is looked very attractive and they still paid a lot of money, but it is not worth it long term, it's fine to say at a certain point, okay, let's maybe stop this contract and refocus on something else.
One of the things I find quite interesting with, like, I've seen, I think, throughout, like, all of the professional career I've had. I mean, it's not that long yet, but...
Sound very old now.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, I've worked at a few companies now, and one of the recurring theme is that you're not serving millions of customers like a SaaS, software as a service company might. You have a handful maybe of customers, and they're all really big contracts. Do you think that can change, or, like, is it because the industry of Earth observation is and Earth observation related analytics is still really early on, where a lot of these companies are getting started? Or do you think it's kind of the nature of it, where we're going to stay with, maybe a a handful, like 100, maybe 1,000 customers, but we're never going to have millions. And when I say we, I mean like the industry, like similar companies.
Yeah, good question. I think for us it came a bit more natural because we felt very comfortable in the large enterprise space for multiple reasons. But I think that was a deliberate choice. Also because the climate impact, and I think individuals can have a huge impact, but then you need to reach tens of millions. And I think what we realized early is that large enterprises, for better or worse, have a lot to say about how we use land, how we treat our forests. So I think that for us was sort of why we realized, okay, it's a tough market because enterprise sales is not always fun, but that's where we feel we can have the biggest impact. I'm not sure if it is that for the Earth observation industry and broad. I mean, everything you said make a lot of sense. I think you get started with those first contracts, which are often large enterprises. There's a lot of grants being given away as well that are mostly fueled by large enterprise. So in that sense, it makes sense. But there's probably a lot of consumer apps that are using Earth observation in some sense, right? Like that we're not even aware of. And that's what I like about the industry as well.
Yeah, I think maybe the best example is just like the weather app on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. We take it for granted. It's just an app, and that's how it. I think that shows that it's a successful product, I guess.
Right.
Piece of software.
Do you imagine getting to a point like that where you plug into more consumer-facing?
I mean, we have thought about it a little bit in the beginning as well. Like, there's so many people that care about trees and that want to tag trees or even label trees for us, right? Like, then you have millions of people that can do the labeling for you on the ground. So we've played a little bit around with that thought. I mean, it's just so totally different compared to how we are operating now. But I would never say no. I would say like it's in the end, like I think what we're building, climate, is also about people and the consumer in the end. So there might be a hook somewhere. It's hard to envision with the tech we have now how that would scale. But I think building something that would be public with the data we already have, and that can only happen once we reach scale.
Yeah,
that's something that I would see happen in the near future. Yeah. But then we need to reach scale first, and then make some part of the data publicly available. I mean, that would be cool, I think.
Right. Yeah, and then back to not focusing as much.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm getting distracted myself, but I mean, you can play with the thoughts, but not execute on it.
No, but I mean, like that's part of the reason, like, I want to have these conversations is like picking people's brains about like, oh, what do you think about this? And I think it's pretty fun or like interesting to make predictions about like, oh, what do I think is going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years? And then come back in 5 years and be like, well, we were kind of wrong. But I think it's still an interesting experiment. And I'm sure it's part of your job a lot to think about where are we heading? Where do we steer the boat? Which direction do we go on? So for me, it's just a fun exercise. For you, it's kind of like the 9 to 5.
Yeah. I liked what someone else said yesterday. I don't know, I read it somewhere. I think like as a startup, you often look ahead as far as the company has been alive. So if it's a 2 weeks old startup, you look 2 weeks ahead because that's when you need to execute. And now we're 4 years old. Probably you need to look 4 years ahead.
Right.
Just plan for that because the team is also bigger. So you need to make more decisions for long term. So yeah, I intentionally leave some of the things for the future open because like there's a lot of things that I'm unsure about, but I'm confident that we can get to a place where we can map large parts of our planet, especially the vegetation, make that actionable for different stakeholders. How we get there, I don't have the answer, but I think that's the goal of Overstory, like mapping more, making it a bit more predictive in terms of what is changing with vegetation, how we have an impact on vegetation as humans and vice versa, and making that data available to different decision makers. I think in 5 years for sure we'll have different type of customers and there might be different type of products as well. But how that exactly looks like, I don't know as well. But I think it's becoming more and more clear that we need more data to improve the decision making around climate, vegetation, how we live in harmony with nature as well. And I think that's I'm quite confident that Overstory can play a huge role in there, but there's a long road ahead with a lot of uncertainties. But that's also part of the fun as well, I guess, of being in an early stage startup. Like there's so many things that we don't know that we will figure out along the way.
Yeah, back to what you were saying, when you started, you didn't know a lot of things. So
I think probably for the better.
Do you have examples of things that went wrong, of like failures or things like that you feel like sharing? I think reason I ask is just because like people, like it's very easy to see people who, you know, have been doing this. You said 4 years. People have been doing companies for much more than that.
Yeah.
And to see, wow, like it's amazing what happened, things like that. But things go wrong sometimes. So yeah, is there something where you'd feel comfortable sharing, or something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I don't think there's plenty of things that go wrong, but probably in my mind I don't classify it as wrong. It's a learning moment,
right?
But I think like there were thin lines, especially in the early years, that we went to a customer in Finland actually, where we were running out of money. It was the last chance that to get some money from that customer. We had to stay in a hostel, which was horrible. Someone was snoring. I couldn't sleep all night the day before the big pitch, but like that was such, like, it could have gone either way, but we won the customer, and that's why we continued with the company. But if we didn't get that contract, then it was an obvious mistake, right? So it's like, I think people always say, oh, you need to be a little bit lucky to be successful, but you also create your own luck, right? I think as an entrepreneur, you create luck moments, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But as long as the majority of those luck moments work out well, I think that's how you grow as a company. But yeah, it's plenty of mistakes, different types of customers probably that were more of a distraction than of added value. I think that those are plenty of those. And I mean, there's so many things that we did wrong in hindsight, but it also is like, it shows that you can learn and adapt, and that's also an important part of failure. I don't like the word of failure, but of making mistakes, I guess.
Okay. And so it seems like what you're saying is more about like what you do from that.
Like, for sure. Yeah.
Making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and maybe it happens again, then you really make sure that it doesn't happen again. But
got it.
Learn something from it. Yeah. There will be a lot of mistakes. Forward that.
You guys started bootstrapped at first, right?
Yeah. When we started the company, it was never the idea to take outside money. I think we made it, and that's why the enterprise play made more sense. We thought like we need a couple of customers to make this work, and that's where the Finland story comes from as well. Like that was a close call, but I think that's also how you learn. Like paying customers is important always, and there's also thin balance there. Like it can be a distraction, so not all money is good, but that really helped in how we look at how we build the company, trying to be capital efficient, making sure that someone is paying for what we're building as well, things like that.
So that was going to be one of my questions. Like you mentioned, you had in mind to raise capital. Now we are. What happened?
I think at a certain moment we realized that we could have a bigger impact when we do raise money, and I think we're still being very intentional about which money to take and what we want to achieve with that money as well. So type of investor is important for us. The goal of raising that money, not just raising money because of raising money, but what is the milestone you hope to get faster because of that money, or what is the extra thing you can do with outside capital. And I think at a certain point it became very clear. We did a Techstar accelerator in Lisbon, and that was the first outside money. It was a small amount, but I think that's when we realized, okay, we can get to bigger impact faster if we take this route. And again, that it all ties up in why we started the company. Like if that's why you're doing it, like then it's an easy at least it felt like an easy decision. Now you have people that want to have 100% control of their company and build it how they want. I think what we wanted is building a company that have a huge impact, and I think that is where the VC money at a certain point really fit in well, and I still think it does now in the route that we're taking.
How do you ensure that you stay on track with the mission, because when you raise money, you give back some of the control on the company that you have, compared to if it were completely bootstrapped and you own everything. Yeah. How did you think about that trade-off in a way?
Yeah, I think choosing the investors is important in that sense, like making sure that they are, like I think all of our early investors were climate investors or impact investors as well. So that can help, but I don't think that's the real answer. I think you need to trust each other. So building a relationship with investors is important. It takes a while before you give out full control of your company, of course. So, but being intentional on who you bring on board and being transparent with them as well on what you're trying to achieve. Like I think if you say that this is why we're building it, then they can decide if they stand behind it, or if they want you to build a massive company in another sector, because that's very, very possible with the team that we have. Obviously, like it doesn't have to be climate; it can be oil and gas monitoring as well, and you can make a lot of more money short term probably. But like being transparent with your investors before they invest, and of course after they invest as well. But I think that helps. But also always being critical. I think listening to people in the team, because some people really joined because of that mission, the team. So making sure that we make the right mistakes, and also admit if you do make a mistake in terms of what direction, and discuss that together and decide what the right direction is. I think it helps that we also have independent board members that are also climate driven. So you can balance it a little bit, but be very cautious in terms of who you get money from is probably the biggest step that you can take.
Is that something that you thought about when making the board? Like making sure that the people here keep the company on track as well on the mission?
Yeah. I think that's one of their main tasks, at least, to zone out, step outside of they are outside of the company, but making sure that we achieve what we want to achieve. And especially these early stages, it's hard to measure. Right? It's hard for us to say, okay, we prevented 10 forest fires. So you're looking for leading indicators, maybe like what did you prevent? Is it an outage in a high fire prone area or things like that? And I think that's where the board also helps to challenge us. Are those the customers really that helped to achieve your mission? And I think that's what I really like about our board, is that they are also thinking in that way, from a data perspective, from a story perspective. But yeah, it's not always super clear and easy, but just having those conversations, or even like inside the company, I enjoy that as well. It's where you learn as well, and trying to be vulnerable. We also don't know everything, and I think that helps as well.
Are you ever concerned that we might, like that a company like Overstory, who has good intentions on the climate, could still end up making things worse, where the intentions are still well founded, but the end result might not go well, or that. So an example of that is other company coming in an attempt of more like greenwashing. Say, like in the Netherlands, Shell is a really big company, who's a big oil and gas company, and is like, oh, we're going to try to do something with this climate vegetation monitoring company. But it's kind of putting a Band-Aid on. I'm on purpose taking a very obvious example. And maybe working with Shell actually would make things better. I'm just saying, like, is that something that is on your mind, and how are you thinking about that as well? As the company grows, as the impact of the company is also bigger, there's more money involved. How do you think about that?
No, I think that's an active topic that we discuss when it happens or when it pops up. And I think one of our active choices was not to work with Shell, for example. We got a lot of requests from the Shells, BPs, etc. as well, not only as an investor, but also to track their reforestation efforts.
I actually took that example. I didn't know it was a real use case.
It's a real example, and I think maybe we discussed it before you joined. Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
But because we don't know if the intentions are really well intended on their side, we said like that's not what we want to do. There's just so much things that they've done in the past that it's not even gray anymore, right? Like it's pretty clear that it will be greenwashing. So that's what we then also tell them, like that's not what we want to do. So I think oil and gas is a no-go for us. Then there's a gray area as well, right? Like you have monoculture, agriculture. How can you help that? So there's like so yeah, this is definitely something that keeps us. Well, it helps us to keep thinking critically about how we can solve a real challenge, because you can also argue like electric utilities, not all of them are climate focused. Some have a lot of,
especially in the US.
Exactly. So I think in that side, and there's probably also a gray area, but I think that's like, even if the CFO of an electric utility doesn't believe in climate change, he still wants to buy our product to prevent forest fires. So I think it's that's an easy market where we can just have a very clear impact on changing the status quo of how they do vegetation management. But there's a gray area as well, and I think some are just already a clear no. I think we try to make sure that our shareholders know that we don't want to do that. We want to make that clear in our statuten from our company, so the rules of our company, that we don't do those kind of things. So there are things you can do. You can never 100% prevent it, but I think it all ends up with the people, right? Like the people that are in the company, because if everyone in the company says, well, then we leave if we start working with company X, it's a strong statement. So it's the people that work at the company, the management, the investors, the board members. As long as everyone is aligned, and there's a gray area where we need to debate and decide, but as long as we can keep that dialogue open, I think we'll be in a good position.
So it's not about creating like a clear rule or a clear like stopgap, but it's building along the ways, making sure everybody's on the same page. So you start building that in the culture of the company as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like there are clear no's, and there are grit, and there are some,
right.
So you need both of them, and
but what I mean is there's not a rule that says we won't ever work with Shell ever. Like that's what I mean by
it's not outspoken, but I would say it's a unwritten rule for the management.
Right. Yeah. Because it's but it's because of like all those other things that have been put in place, where the people working in the company, the board, all, like even on the investors, like it just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't align with everything that's done, and it would, like, because of everything you've built in place, it might end up being more detrimental, even if it's a big lump of money.
Yeah. I think like it's an easy no for me if
right.
Well, I regularly get an email from one of the big oil companies, so it's an easy no to just, like, if you're confident that that's the right decision, I think it's an easy, like, it's a very easy no. But like there's gray areas, and I think that's where you need more of those conversations. But I think that's it again ties up with why we started the company. I would rather than stop the company than have Shell as our biggest customer. I just I cannot sell that to myself or to my daughter, so it's an easy decision for me, actually.
Yeah, I see. I want to go a little bit over what it's been like for you personally to like, as the company grows, to evolve through the company as well. So very beginning you mentioned you're a data scientist at heart. How do you describe the work you do now? Like, what's your role right now as the CEO? What does a CEO do? What does the CEO of Overstory do?
Yeah, and it evolves a lot in the last few years, like from 2 people to 5 people to now 31 people, I think. Like, it evolves a lot, and that's, I guess, what I also like about the role, that you need to learn a lot of things on the job and talk with a lot of different stakeholders within the company, outside the company. But I think my main tasks are not running out of money, building the best team out there as well, and making sure we achieve our mission, long-term mission, and how we get there. So have a clear path to get there, although it changes over time. But I think those are really important for the success of Overstory, and where I can help keep people focused on what we do as well. And it sounds like really easy now, but it's different things in motion, of course, every day. Like sometimes it's more focused on one on the other, but I think that's the core thing I do, and also helping my direct reports to make sure that they can execute on what's best for their teams.
And how is
so
that?
A lot of talking. Like if you told me, well, even if you tell my friends from 10 years ago that I'm in meetings probably back to back every day, 30-minute meetings with investors, with shareholders, or with potential customers. And the funny thing is that I really enjoy that nowadays, but I wouldn't have believed that 10 years ago. Like, oh, you're speaking with 10 utilities on one day. Do you really enjoy that? Well, now I really do, because I really like what I'm doing and I know why we're doing it. So it's a very easy, like for an introvert person as me, that's actually a data scientist by heart, it's very easy to do my work on a daily basis and enjoy it, because I know why we're doing it and get a lot of joy of doing that, learning new stuff, talking with a lot of people. Yeah, I think it's very different, but even than 3 years ago probably, but that's part of the fun.
And how has that, because you mentioned it's kind of happened quite quickly, like we're talking a span of a couple 2-3 years. How has that been as well? Because it kind of slowly happened. Like what I mean by that is every day it changes a little bit, but it's not a drastic thing from you're coding 6 hours a day to you're doing meetings all day. How has that transition been for you?
I think it's slow, but at a certain point you realize, okay, now you need to make a hard decision or a clear decision that you're not coding, because you have other things that are more important on a day. And that's I think that's not only for technical CEOs or technical founders a difficult moment, because you really need to transition and switch, right? Like, oh, now you're a leader or a people manager, or it can be different types of things. But I think that decision and making that decision is often a big hurdle for people, because you don't want to let go of things that you're actually good at, or what you already know. So I think it happened gradually, but I think at a certain point it was clear, like, okay, now I need to focus on my other tasks, because that has a bigger impact on the company. And I think then again, if you in hindsight it's so easy, but if you think about it on that, it's an easy decision at a certain point. Probably it was already too late, but I think just trying to think of what is the biggest impact you can have on the company helps it. But yeah, sometimes you miss the coding, but I just haven't written any Python, I think, in 2 years now. No.
I was gonna ask about that. Do you miss it?
Sometimes, like if I see what you're all presenting at a weekly, or if I join some of these sessions, I'm like, oh, this is so cool, like what you can do with just coding, and how complex things you can do with machine learning, with just by bringing together a group of people that are really good at what they do. I think that's being part of that. I think that's what you miss sometimes, but I'm part of that, but it's just on a different level, I guess. So
right.
The coding itself, maybe less. I not necessarily miss it now, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Because, like, from what you're saying, I'm the way I interpret it is, like, when a lot of people really like coding because it's like problem solving. It's like, oh, you feel like you can run your code and you see it run on like 10,000 CPUs or something, and like, you're, oh my god. But you've found that in doing something else. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. And I think that's why I described it as a data scientist, because it's
right.
It's still, maybe it's more the problem solving, that part that I enjoy of what I'm doing now, but it's on a very different problems, I guess. But that's the fun part about doing my job, is you're continuously, like in a startup, you will have many challenges along the way, and how do you deal with that? How you get out of those challenges stronger? I think that's the crux of being in or growing a startup. And it's not much different from coding, indeed. It's just different language, different tools, less notebooks, all different type of notebooks.
Do you see still some things from like the more traditional data science work that you were doing that translate into the more leadership role you have today?
Maybe less that really fine detailed problem solving coding, where on for example the model fine tuning, etc. It's more strategic than really what I enjoyed as a data scientist. At least is like really getting the most out of our models. That's probably why I liked Kaggle a lot. Like, how can you squeeze more out of those models? But that's less now, for sure. Like, it's more high over challenges that you need to solve with a team. And I think that's like a good data scientist works in a team, because you're never a generalist, you're a specialist, and you need a data engineer or a full stack to really solve a data science problem as well. And I think that part is quite similar. Like, how do you bring your own expertise to the table and solve it with a team? I think there's a lot of similarities there that I enjoy in my work today. And like, if I have time, I just speak in some of the GitHub commits and see what you're all doing, so that I don't have to do it myself. But it's fun to see how it's still evolving so fast with the team, for sure.
Yeah, I'm guessing like that reflects in how you hire as well, like looking for people who can take over that part and looking for skills. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, both on like what I'd like to touch on is on the technical side, but we also talked about the product side, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Like, what has been your approach to like growing the team and thinking about who you bring on?
Yeah, I think we've always approached it more like, what are we in terms of what are we missing in the team, and what can someone new complement to what we already have. So is it new type of experience or different type of experience or skills? And then not necessarily looking at tool set use or specific languages used, but really like, what is the experience of that person? Can be tech or business, and how can that contribute to Overstory to grow to the next phase? And I think really trying to see how we can complement the team with each new hire. I think that helped us, at least I like that approach, because then you're less focused on resumes, on CVs. I think it's more about diversity in the broadest sense, right? It's about, especially because we're working in such a problem-solving industry, is like, you need a diverse mindset, experience to solve these tough challenges, and people with different experience will bring a different perspective, and I think that's super valuable. And I think that's what you also said, I think, is very noticeable in our team, that it's very diverse in multiple dimensions. And I think that's still how we grow the team, where we probably prefer specific experience over hard qualifications in terms of 8 years of GeoPandas. It's not even possible, so that's good.
But how do you what do you look for in people? Because like like 8 years of GeoPandas, it's very easy to put that on a resume and be like, oh wow, okay, that's really cool, that's useful. But a lot of other skills about like, this person's really good at bringing a team together or things like that. How have you approached that?
I think you get the most out of the conversations, and I think it's difficult because you need to decide to hire someone in 3, maybe 5 conversations. So I think that's also where you shouldn't be too afraid to make maybe a mistake, or sometimes take a gamble because you really see something in a person. But I think the conversations and asking those questions that people can share about experience or how they dealt with specific situations, and you can still practice it, and maybe it's not always like fully uncovering, but I think that's how we try to filter or try to find the best fit for Overstory. And it's never black and white. It's always very difficult, and it's a two-way interview as well, of course. Like what I really enjoy is trying to be honest about what our challenges are, what we need help with, and what's not working and what is working, because that gives also the other person more of a view of how that person can contribute. And I think that's most important. Like, okay, if I join that company, how can I contribute to the growth of the team, of the company as well? But I'm also going to be honest, like, hiring is difficult, like, especially in this market. People have a lot of choices, and there's a lot of remote jobs to pick from, so it is difficult. But trying to get most out of those interviews with good conversations, I think that's super helpful.
I think you touched on like the remote side as well. There's been this thing called a pandemic that came that kind of shifted the world a bit, and so coming out of that, like the Overstory is a remote first company. Can you talk a little bit about what the decision was on that side, like how you might have thought about that?
No, it was I think when the pandemic started, we were five people in our office in WeWork in Amsterdam, so we were in person, just 5 people, but we had to grow the team. So during the pandemic, I think we grew the team to maybe 10, 12 people in the first phase, and like it was going up and down with the lockdowns. But I think and that's I think an important part of building a company as well. You need to adapt to the situation, right? Like it is what it is. There is COVID. There's nothing we can do about it. But how can we still build a strong team in that situation? And I think we just realized, this is actually working really well for us. We need to double down on certain aspects of the remote work. But I think this actually can scale for us as well, because we also got a lot of benefits out from it. From I think on the tech side, but also on the business side, and doing way more meetings during a day instead of just visiting one customer in person. You could do 8 during the day, but also like having more focus time as a programmer really helped. But you need to compensate it with those social moments, and in the beginning it worked really well to have those moments during workday, but at a certain point people were also tired of Zoom. So I think trying to adapt to those situations really helped us. It's still not easy. We haven't figured everything out, but I think the benefits definitely outweigh the shortcomings of remote, especially if you also look where we can hire now, where our team is coming from. And I think it's important to have those moments to meet in person, as we did in February with the whole team here. But I strongly now do believe in remote work, and I didn't before the pandemic for sure.
Right. So it's
changed a lot.
Yeah, and back to that point about like adapting.
I mean, like neither of the solutions is perfect. What I think is even worse is not picking between the two. So that's why I think if you say like we're hybrid always, like, so then people need to be around Amsterdam, and you say 2 days per week you go to you don't really. I think what I don't like about that is that you don't make a decision. So now it's remote first. So people, like large part of your work will be remote. So that is something you need to nail and adjust your way of working to. And then you can still meet in person, like a lot of people do, like you do a lot as well. And that's good. But I don't think like it should be hybrid first. I don't believe in that concept. It should be one or the other. And then you can still meet. And I think that's what I like about saying remote first. Doesn't mean that you cannot ever meet someone from the team. You can actually meet 5 times per week if you want, but it's more of a decision from the person itself.
I'd like to touch a little bit on like the current like economic situation, which is like this whole post-COVID. I don't know if it's like officially a recession yet, but we're basically heading towards that. Which basically means, especially for like young startups, there's going to be a lot of changing and adapting to that. Can you talk a little bit about like how you're thinking about that? Maybe like what's the impact on a company like Overstory for something like that? Sometimes it feels very distant about like, okay, cool, there's this thing that, first of all, we hear a lot about in the US, maybe a little bit less in Europe. Well, I mean, there's also like the war going on in Ukraine. How does that affect a company like Overstory?
Yeah, I think in the end it affects all company in one way or the other. And I think for us, like it can have different impacts on the company, right? And I think how we look at it is what are those potential impacts on Overstory. So how does it affects our ability to raise more money? I think that's a clear one. But also, how does it affect our ability to sell to our customers? Will they be hit by a potential recession, or maybe the recession is already here, or the hiring part? Like, how does it impact access to talent? And I think trying to separate those a little bit and then prepare for that, I think is important in these times. And a lot of people don't like, this is how the economy works, for better or worse. There are different ups and downs, and I think if you realize that, and I think this will happen, I think what is scary for a lot of companies and people is that there's a lot of uncertainty. How long will it take? No one can predict it. Like, or is it even a recession? Maybe not. Will it come later? But there will be a recession between now and the coming 20, 40 years. It's just a given, right? And I think if you put yourself in that mindset, you can also think about how can we get through this stronger, faster. because I think the truth is also like a lot of strong companies are built during a recession, right? Like a recession gives a lot of opportunity because companies will fail. There will be a lot of talent available. Things will be also be more cost efficient. So trying to prepare for that and grab that momentum to get out of it stronger is really, it's just a new challenge on our way, I would say. Like, and it's a tough one. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's impacting, I think, fundraising most. But I think what we are like as Overstory, maybe as a company, is lucky is that we're selling to an industry that is a bit more recession proof. So they still need to buy our solution. We have multi-year contracts. I think we're in a good position. But yeah, I think I also don't want to be naive, right? I think this is going to impact potentially a lot of companies and people and startups as well. So trying to prepare for that and make sure we can get out of it stronger. I think Alexi uses this, it's our VP of engineering, he uses this metaphor, like even if you have a strong house with a strong foundation and a storm is coming, you still go inside, right? You cover up the windows and prepare for the storm, even though you're almost certain that you can go through it, but you need to prepare and go inside. And I think that's exactly the best thing to do now. And then the better you're prepared, the sooner you can open the windows and pick up the pace again. And I think that's important, but it's a lot of uncertainty, and it's part of the challenge. And I think we're really in a good position, but I think we're just seeing what the market does, listening to the signals and trying to navigate that.
I'd like to shift a little bit, focus on the whole Earth observation side. One of the ways that I see Overstory is we're kind of like a chef who's making meals, and we go to the supermarket and we shop for the best ingredients for whatever makes the best meal. And so we go and we kind of see in the supermarket, okay, what is out there? Maybe there's like a new tomato sauce that comes out. And so we're like, okay, cool, I'll take this one now. As compared to if you're a data provider, like let's say Planet, we talked about Planet, they're kind of making the tomato sauce. And so the meals that they're going to be able to make is going to be biased towards what they create. First of all, do you see that the same way, or?
I think so. I'm getting hungry from this conversation, but I think so. Yeah. I mean, you're more limited by your own data in that sense, indeed. So.
And so from that side, what do you want to see from the supermarket? Like, what is it that, we are focused on the vegetation side from all the data providers that we get, and maybe what you're seeing from the trends of companies like Planet, which is kind of on the new space side, and then there's Airbus, which is not the new space side. What would you like on the data provider side things to happen? Or what are you looking for, at least in what's happening right now?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things happening in this space, no pun intended. But I think Planet was such a clear disruptor. I don't know how many years ago, but like I think what I see that other new startups are doing now is trying to disrupt them again, right? It's moving really fast for such a traditional industry, and I think it helps that launching your satellite is of course more cost efficient now, but I think what we see is more frequent updates, higher temporal resolution, but also higher spatial resolution is coming sooner than later, and I think that is something we definitely want to use. And I think what we hear a lot in the market is, okay, but then it should come at a very attractive price. But I think for us it would be even more interesting just to have high resolution at the same price or even a bit more expensive, because we can ask that premium from our customers as well. But that's coming, so I think I'm excited about that. I think more hyperspectral data is really interesting. If you look at vegetation, obviously, and tree species, tree health, I think what we can do with 4, maybe 6 bands is already amazing, but more access to hyperspectral data at scale with a high enough resolution, I think that's where you can even dive deeper into really the species level, so on the genus level, or maybe different types of health issues with the tree species, with certain tree species as well. Maybe you can even detect what kind of bug is infecting the tree. Yeah, I think the SAR data still, well, you're more from that space, you know better than I, but it's still not as explored yet. So I think there will be a lot of new use cases coming out by just having more access to that data. So I'm also looking forward to that. Obviously, like half of the time the Earth is without sun, and then the other quarter is probably with clouds. So there's like huge opportunity to monitor more frequent, and especially if you look towards more real-time applications in terms of forest change or storm damage or forest fires even. I think that's where there will be a lot of wins. I think for us it's just so exciting that there are so many providers that we can work with all of them. Like you mentioned, that we have so many ingredients to pick from in the supermarket, and we're not dependent on one, and they all what I find interesting is that they're all slightly different, right? Like, okay, maybe they both have 50 centimeter multispectral resolution, but it's not the same 50 centimeter, right? And one has more higher frequent revisit time, and others have better resolution. I don't know, but it's just a very interesting time to be a downstream provider, I think. Right. That's also good for us, I think, for the long-term health of the company.
Are you concerned about companies like that starting to eat that cake of the analytics, the derived products as well, like not just selling data, but start eating into directly going to the vegetation side? We're talking about vegetation monitoring, so let's go on that vertical. Is that a concern of yours?
No, I mean, we always are looking out what's next for that market, but not a huge concern. It will happen. Like, if there's money to be made, other companies will jump in. It's a good sign because it means like the market is big enough. So I think that's why agriculture is a huge market where I think the planets and other providers are already stepping in to do more downstream. But like I think I think what we actually see is more niche players or vertical players that really bring a product to the end consumer, because that's like we discussed earlier, that's where the actual value is, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't see these basically hardware companies doing that sooner. But I think in the end there will be some consolidation. I don't think we can deny that. But it's not. I don't think it's a fear of us that will happen soon. But it will be good for the market if there's some consolidation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the things I have in mind is like Planet acquiring Vandersats recently. Yeah. Is that also something that you have in mind of like being acquired by a company like Planet, for example?
Yeah, what I like by that acquisition is that they didn't bought a company that's only using their data, right? They actually extended their market by someone that's selling also to other products to other type of companies. So I think that was a smart move. I think for us wouldn't be the right move now, because then you're dependent. Although you can still buy from another provider, I think it will be different. And I think as an independent party, you can do more of that grocery shopping. So I think that is definitely, I think, not high on our list to be acquired by a satellite imagery vendor.
Yeah, you don't want to get locked into one tomato sauce provider.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
That makes sense. But do you see that down the line as in like, what are the exit strategies for Overstory that, like, again, back to how do you align the mission of the company wanting to have the biggest impact to when, like, you've raised VC money and that means there's an exit strategy probably in mind. How do you bring those two things together?
Yeah, I think like if you look at the mission and what we still can do as a company, I think there's I always say like building a company is a marathon, not a sprint. So there's a long road ahead, and I think there's so much more that we can do. That selling Overstory is really one of the last things in my mind, because we can just do so more. So then like going public is the most logical option, because then you can do even more of what you're planning to do yourself. And I think there will be more consolidation maybe with other players than with a satellite imagery provider, so it can be in your niche market if you decide to stay there. I think vegetation is so broad that it doesn't make sense to be acquired by a specific tree trimming company, of course. But I think we really in this for the long game. So I think how we can have, if there's a partner down the road that can strengthen our impact, of course, then I think we'll definitely consider that. I think for now there's just so much more to do and to explore that we're playing the long game.
So let's entertain that thought for a little bit more. Right now, a lot of the space companies that went public recently, like, are kind of going down in terms of stock value. Is that something that you think about, or do you think like a company like Overstory, even though it depends on a lot of space infrastructure, is decorrelated from that, or even like it's so far down the line that it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I think now it feels very correlated because that's our main input. But I think long-term Overstory doesn't only rely on satellite images per se. I think so. I think that opens up another can of worms probably. But I think that's more how I envision the future of Overstory. Like we're not so dependent on images, or not on satellite images alone long-term. I think now we are, obviously, because that's really where you can have the biggest impact. But I don't see us as much as correlated, and I think we really want to build a big business before we go public as well. So timing is really important there as well. And yeah, of course the stocks go down, but I think Planet published quite good numbers for Q1. The expectations were a bit different because of a large deal, but it's still going strong. I think they also play the long game, right? I think having a quarter of maybe lower expectations should be fine if you're confident about the company that you're building, and I think the people at Planet are, so it should be fine.
What are those other dependencies?
I don't know. You tell me. Like there's so many different types of sensors you can think of, right? And I think that makes it also challenging. But I think I always have in the back of mind, like with satellites, you can do large areas, but if you can combine it with some micro data in the field, maybe a small sensor that you don't have to put in every meter, but just very sparsely because you have that macro data already. I think combining some micro with macro sensors can be very interesting, but it only works if you're already doing it at scale as well. So I think it's the trade-off, and I think I think we're always open to experiment with new different sensors, but it's like you mentioned, it shouldn't also distract us too early. But especially if you look into the wildfire space that we're operating now, there's so many sensors on the ground already, and we have a very different perspective. I think those two can go together, and that doesn't mean that we should use those sensors, but first you collaborate with a different type of vendor, and then it evolves over time. But that's exciting to see how that evolves over the next decades probably, because even I think sensor fusion in satellite images, like combining SAR with optical imagery, it doesn't happen as often yet.
Yeah, and I think if we're thinking about that, like, I feel like sometimes we take things like Planet and Copernicus for granted. I'm sticking on these two because these are actually really recent. I think Copernicus is 2016 and Planet is like a 10 or 12-year-old company. So it's like the past decade, basically. Yeah, it's crazy. Like there's Landsat and Modus, which is like huge, but Landsat became open in 2008, which is like when it really started taking off. So we're talking about like 15 years, and the whole industry is still super young, basically, where the commercial sector comes in. So even on the data, like what the supermarket's going to look like in 10 years is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to predict, Yeah, so I think the low-hanging fruit is indeed more combining even more satellite-based sensors over time as well.
Do you see what is currently the main challenge? Is it like on the technical side, or is it on the customer side? Like now that you have a little bit more that product market fit, and like the data is evolving a lot. Like I think most people who are listening to that like understand that. But I'm curious to have your point of view. Like, what do you see as the main challenge to face at the moment?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting moment because we have that product market fit, and it's a little bit of a balance between both. Like we can we onboard 100 new customers tomorrow? Probably not, because then we are more limited by the tech. And vice versa, you can also make that statement, right? So we're trying to balance that growth that we can also deliver the quality on it, because I think quality is really an integral part of what we deliver at Overstory. So making sure that we don't lose that is important to me and to the company. So I would say like it's a little bit of both at the moment, which is I think a good moment to scale faster. But I think this is an interesting period where we see that there's so much interest from the market. So how can we grab that in a healthy way so that we can also execute with the same quality as we've always done? I think that's a little bit the balance that we're now facing, which is I think a healthy balance, because both are solvable, but you also don't want to over engineer too much now and then the customers don't follow, right? And I think that balance is a little bit what we're continuously balancing at the moment.
Which sounds like a great problem to have, by the way.
I think so, yeah. And that evolves as well, right? I think now that problem is really clear. I think last few months, and it wasn't a year ago. So I think it's definitely a good problem to be in.
How are you thinking about that? Like about the growth of, I think when you hear a lot of founders talk, there is this thing that happens when you pass this like 20 to 50% people, when you move from like everybody personally.
Max, right?
No.
That would be painful, yeah.
But also like what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and you kind of have a rough idea to like, oh, we hired this person. Do they work here? Yeah. How do you think about that as well, especially in a remote first environment where there's no coffee machine to go have a chat to, and you can bump into even the intern that comes and like, hey, I'm the CEO, by the way. What do you do?
Yeah.
Is that something you think about?
It sounds right that you say between 20 and 50 people, because it's getting harder and harder now to meet everyone on a very regular basis. But I strongly believe that a company is built out of people, right? The people build the product, build the business, acquire customers, deliver on new features. So that's really important to me as well. So I think trying to stay, like I don't need to know what everyone does on a daily basis, obviously, but I think it's important to not, because it's more difficult now, just look away. I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think it's trying to be more intentional and understanding what everyone is doing. I like how we set up the weekly, and we need to see how that evolves. So at the end of the week, we all present what has been done, and we try to keep it short and concise. And we did that already when we were at 3 people, I think. So it's evolved a lot over the last few years. But I think that for me is a really interesting session where I also don't have to say anything. So after a full day of meetings, sometimes I say something, obviously, but I can listen to all the great work that everyone has been doing the whole week, and that's pretty exciting to me. And I try to, I would say I read a lot of the Slack messages still in a very different, sometimes very technical channels as well. So I try to keep up with everything that's happening, but it's definitely getting more difficult. And what I at least hope is that everyone knows that the door, I guess the Slack door is always open, that if you want to talk, that's actually what I enjoy as well.
Right.
But we'll have to see. I think even if you have a company of 100 people, it's still those 100 people that are building the company, right? So it's very important, I think, to know what is happening and who is joining your company. So that's why I still keep on pressing. I want to meet every candidate, at least for the final round, because these are people that will help shape Overstory for the future.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you can still meet everyone within the team? Obviously within the tech team, but is it changing? Because the team has grown a lot since you joined. So
yeah, that's a good question. I joined like nearly a year ago now, and I feel like the team has doubled in that time. I think it's on the tech side, yes. because there's still a lot of overlap with the things that we do.
Yeah.
But then there is like people who are a bit more removed from what I directly do. But I think I think like having things like these weekly meetings where you do see people and you get to hear like, oh, these people have been working. Oh, they actually do something here at the company. Yep. And then the other way around where you have to justify, maybe not justify is not the right term, but like explain, oh, this is the thing that I've been doing and this is how it relates to everything. I think it's a good exercise to kind of keep that cohesion about this is like a coherent thing and everything is linked together.
Yeah.
Like one of the changes I see is that at the beginning, like you wear like 10 hats and then it kind of slows down a little bit, like reduces, but you're still doing that and keeping that link between everybody. And like, oh, my thing links to this other thing, which links to this other thing, which makes the product better at the end. I still think we're doing that. And for me, it's really interesting. Like one of the things I really like at Overstory is the fact that the tech isn't the center point. Like obviously it's really interesting, but even the remote sensing and the Earth observation isn't. Like most people don't know about satellite imagery in the company, which is not in like the places I was at before, which is really interesting because it provides that other point of view about like, nobody cares about this, like, and so it kind of forces, I know for me at least, forces me to think about, okay, what's the actual value of this new feature, or why is this data set exciting for what we're doing? It's like challenging in that sense, in a way that I think if we really want to have an impact with Earth observation, which is a lot of things I care about. Like, I think this industry is like really interesting, but how do we move from like, we're a bunch of nerds who think this is interesting to let's go talk to people who don't care about it and see it as a tool like you were talking about. And so I try to go talk to other people about like, what do you see? What's the value that you see in this thing that like nobody cares about, like the satellite imagery? I find that really interesting to talk to people who within the company or even outside who don't care about satellite imagery. But I do wonder what happens when you reach like 100 people or 200, because it doesn't stop there.
No, that's true. Yeah, and I think the time zones make it more difficult. But
that's true.
There's not a lot of overlap between California and Eastern Europe. So, but yeah, I like what you said. Indeed, like I think also for the business people, it is interesting that you present like how you got to a certain solution, right? Like it's not as straightforward to implement something. You need to bring in different things, but explain that in an easy way that people can also understand it is important in that meeting. Otherwise it's hard to get. But I think that's a crucial part of keep doing that. And now everyone can say something, and probably there will be less time per person. But I do think we need to. I think it's an important part of having those connections and meeting in person. I think that helps. If you met someone once in person, that's a huge difference.
They're like, it's actual person.
Exactly. Oh.
No, I feel quite strongly about that. I mean, like, this is why I try to do these recordings as much as I can in person, because there's something that happens when, first of all, like you see the gear and it's like, okay, this guy is serious about this, but you're also not like, we're focused on this thing. We're not answering an email at the same time. And I think there is something about being able to look at someone in the eye and be like, have that conversation. So I think there's this thing that happens when people sit down at the same table. And there's also like the moment where, for the podcast, when we stop recording or when the meeting ends and then you go grab a coffee, like there's a lot that happens as well on that. So I'm very biased towards trying to have a lot of in person as well.
Makes sense.
I like rounding these conversations off by also asking the same question every time. I like asking people if they have book or podcast recommendations. So there's a couple reasons for that. First off, I think my goal is to try to like pick people's brains. The podcast is minds behind maps. I'm trying to understand the people, and I think what people read and what they're interested in reading or the podcast they listen to is quite interesting and telling. And then it's because a lot of these are recommended through word of mouth. There's not a book recommending algorithm like YouTube, for example. It's a little bit the same for podcasts. So I'm not especially looking for anything that has to do with anything that we've talked about, but just if there's books in general that you think are worth recommending or podcasts.
Yeah, I think the honest question is I haven't read many books and listened to many podcasts in the last 9 months with a small baby at home. So
fair enough, right?
But I think one that I enjoyed was Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. I think I got it right. Because it has also a little bit of the, you work in climate, like there's a lot of, if you see what's happening, there's a lot of negativity. If you keep reading the news, there was very depressing news here in the Netherlands as well, that we're probably not going to make our target. So I like some of these climate books that also have a positive outlook of how we actually can get there with the people that are actually on this planet. So I think that is a really nice book that I would recommend to read as well. But I should read more, but something is keeping me awake, and it's not a podcast.
I can't believe you didn't recommend Overstory.
Yeah, I mean, the honest question is I haven't finished the book as well. So I read a large part of the book, but I have never finished it. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
Well, then you should.
But it's the fun thing about like every time it's like, oh, I work in a company named Overstory. It's like, oh, like the book?
Yeah, it happens a lot. Yeah, I like the book a lot, but you need to like how the stories are told.
Right. Is the company named after the book? Like, how did you decide on the name of the company?
No, that's another podcast probably, how we decide to change our name, because previously we were called 23.ai, which is probably the worst name you can pick. And then we went on a journey. I think we were 7 people back then, and then deciding on what the new name would be. And I think we all eventually, like, Overstory is a strong name. It means like the tallest tree standing above the other canopies. So it really matches with our top-down view, obviously. And I think we decided to do that. And the book was already out, I think, but it's not necessarily named after the book.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's not the best SEO choice. Great. Well, Indra, thanks a lot for the time. Thanks for the conversation. It was great.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on, and I joined the conversation as well. Happy that I could ask you also one question, but see you on Monday.
Oh, it's the same, the door's always open on Slack.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Indra. Before you go, I just wanted to give you a few final thoughts. I'm trying to do more and more of these conversations in person. They take a lot more time and a lot more preparation, but I ultimately think they lead to better conversation. I think there's something that happens when 2 people sit at a table and look at each other in the eye and actually have a conversation without any distractions or anything. And there's just microphones, the camera's somewhere else. We don't go through a computer interface to have that conversation. So I'm trying to do a lot more of those. If you want to hear a little bit more about that, I actually wrote a newsletter a little while ago. I'm trying this out where I want to show a little bit more of the behind the scenes, how I'm thinking about this. So if that sounds interesting, you can head to mindsbehindmaps.com and you'll find a link to subscribe to the newsletter there. I won't send you any junk or anything, and I don't really have a schedule for this. I'm just trying to share some thoughts from time to time. And while you're there, the best thing you can do to help support the show is to leave a review. There's a section on the website. You can also do it on Apple Podcast or on Spotify if you listen to the podcast there. And if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you think about this conversation. These kinds of things actually help a lot for me to make a better case for the podcast. Whenever I want to share it, whenever I want to get a guest, I can point them towards that to show that there's legitimate interest in these conversations and people find value. Thanks again a lot for listening. I hope I'll catch you next time. Cheers.